Okay, all right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. We'll begin. I'm sure maybe some more people will join us. And the title tonight is COVID Shalot, the questions of our difficult and unique time, this period of the coronavirus pandemic. And unfortunately, we are approaching, if we have not yet already hit, the 1-year anniversary. For many people, Purim was the last time they were in shul. Some people have returned in some ways, some still not, but Purim was the last time that we were in shul with a large crowd, and unfortunately we're already approaching this coming Purim, which will be a year. And throughout this entire year there have been many unique halachic questions that have come up, and so that is only continuing. So in our title we have two topics, two questions that we're going to try to address. And the first is regarding the vaccine. What if someone gets an appointment on Shabbos? How do you manage that? Can you get the vaccine on Shabbos? And the second topic is hearing the Megilla by Zoom. And each of those topics could have easily filled an hour. And even though there is complexity to each of those topics, we can cut to the core. And to some degree, the questions are relatively simple. And we already have a wonderful talk, already have a talk scheduled for next week. Professor Dr. Malka Simkovich, some of you know her, she used to live in Brookline. So I only had 1 week to work with, at least before Purim. So I figured I would get both of the topics into this evening. Most of the time, I'm going to share my screen to see the sources together, but we'll unshare it periodically to discuss more as a group. I hope that plan sounds okay to everyone. We'll be recording as always. Any questions or comments before I begin? Okay, give me 1 moment just to get everything ready. I apologize. Okay. During this year, there have been a small group of very influential poskim, at least influential in our communities. There are other great poskim, but maybe have not had as much influence on our communities. And to name three, I would say in no particular order, they are Rav Hershel Schachter from Yeshiva University, Rav Yosef Tzvi Rimon, who is the Rav of Alon Shvut in Israel. He holds other positions, and his rulings and his teachings have been distributed widely and has had a lot of influence. And thirdly, Rav Asher Weiss. Rav Asher Weiss is a Haredi Hasidish posek, but who has a great, we'll call it crossover appeal, and in the Dati Leumi world in Israel, in the modern Orthodox world in America. He also grew up in America, so he understands America from that perspective. And his tshuvos and his rulings have also been very influential. When it comes to this first question, what to do, what is permissible to do if you have an appointment for the COVID vaccine on Shabbos? So the only one of them that has published something is Rav Asher Weiss, and he's published a few tshuvos, and we're going to see two of them, parts of them inside. I myself already received this question already a few weeks ago, and we'll come back to it. The question I received was someone in Brookline. I'm not sure in Massachusetts if our regular appointments on Saturday, on Shabbos or not. This person had gotten an appointment at Fenway on Friday afternoon at I don't remember exactly, the time was 4 o'clock, something like that. So the appointment was technically, this was already a month ago before Shabbos began, but the person was almost for sure going to have to be there when it was already Shabbos. So we'll come to that version of the question, and there are different versions of this question. So we'll begin by reading part of a tshuva from Rav Asher Weiss. I will share my screen right now. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see this. Everyone can see this? You can see it? Okay. Rosh Chodesh Teves Tafshin Pei Aleph a few months ago. Kvod Talmida Yakiri, my precious student, Harav Aaron Yeshaya Schechter. This is actually Rav Schechter's son, Rashai Schechter. Rosh Varav Verosh Beis Medrash Bekihilas Yisrael Hatzair, Woodmere, New York. He is what has a position entitled Rosh Beis Medrash in the Young Israel of Woodmere. So Rav Asher Weiss is writing this tshuva in response to a question from Rav Shai Schechter. Okay. He says, Lidati, I'm reading here, I only have Hebrew for this. Ein lahater v'zechel Shabbos deraisa. Rav Asher Weiss is of the opinion that at least as a general rule, he's not comfortable saying that someone can violate Shabbos on a Torah level to get the vaccine on Shabbos. So let's say driving a car is violating Shabbos on a Torah level because you're causing a fire to burn, at least in an old-fashioned non-electric car. Let me keep reading a little bit and we'll comment on this. Kikama rachok liras b'kabalas hachisun. Chisun is vaccine in Hebrew. Pikuach nefesh hadocha Shabbos. He says it's difficult to say that it rises to the level of pikuach nefesh to break Shabbos on a biblical level to get the vaccine. Now, Rav Asher Weiss is not someone, if you're not familiar with his writings, he's not someone insensitive to the issues at hand and to the medical, the medical knowledge of today. But the question is, this is the first basic fundamental question: do we consider getting a vaccine true pikuach nefesh to break Shabbos on a Torah level? Now, the question, of course, is going to be, well, what is the alternative? If let's say you can easily schedule an appointment within days, then I think everyone would agree it's hard to say it's pikuach nefesh to such a degree to break Shabbos on a Torah level to get the vaccine a few days earlier. The question is, though, what if there's going to be a longer delay, or you don't know, right? If you turn it down, you don't know, when then they will schedule you for an appointment. I was talking to a rabbi in Riverdale. He was saying maybe there's a difference between the first and second dose, at least on I forget which one, the Pfizer, because there's a smaller window of when you can get the second dose, based on the number of days since the first dose for it to be fully effective. I'm not sure if that's true or not. Anyone can comment. But does it rise to the level of to be true pikuach nefesh, to break Shabbos on a Torah level, that you could get in a car and drive yourself to get the vaccine? Obviously, if it's within walking distance, you can't. But if, let's say, you get an appointment in some hospital 45 minutes from here, could you drive yourself? So Rav Asher Weiss is not comfortable saying that is permitted. I'll just read a few more lines of what he says. Continue this paragraph here. And even though we don't follow the majority, even if there's only a small risk, we do let someone break Shabbos. But it is difficult to define the borders, the boundaries of when you can break Shabbos, meaning how small of a chance will we accept to be a pikuach nefesh consideration to break Shabbos on a Torah level? That is certainly a good question. And everyone agrees to this. A 1 in a billion chance is not enough to break Shabbos on a biblical level. But the question is how to classify someone getting the vaccine. Maybe Rav Asher in personal conversations would say that there are cases where it does rise to the level of pikuach nefesh, but as a general rule, he's not comfortable giving a general psak that you can drive to get the vaccine. Now, I'm going to pause here. Actually, I want to hear if anyone has any reaction to this, or everyone thinks this is obvious.
I don't know if I would say that it's 100% obvious, but it's not surprising because it's not, the vaccine isn't a treatment for an illness. It's something to prevent an illness, but there are other ways of preventing contracting the coronavirus with fairly high probabilities of success. if somebody was
So
sick
that,
and
Rav
this
Asher
was a
himself
cure,
says this. He says, of course, the person should be following all social distancing and wearing masks and et cetera, et cetera. And since you can do that, that's one of the reasons why he's reluctant to define pikuach nefesh.
but
I'll tell you,
what
to
about,
me, and yes, I'm sorry. Yes, who else wanted to say something?
sorry,
Yes.
it's still William. What
Yeah,
about
continue.
something that there might be a question as to whether it's d'oraita or mid'Rabbanan, like if when going to get the vaccine, one needs to have one's insurance card.
Very good, and we're going to get to all that way.
Solid.
Very good, very
Okay.
good. We're very good. Let me continue, everyone, just for a couple of minutes because we.
Can I just,
Yes, someone want to say something?
I do.
Yes, Carol.
I just want to come in on the mental health side and say that it could be a pikuach nefesh because of the angst and the stress that somebody on a regular basis is experiencing as a result of the situation. And they may think this is their only chance because people aren't, as you say, it's uncertain, but also, what we know about mind body stuff is that it impacts other systems and you might not be aware of what's physically going on that in fact can be quite detrimental.
Sure,
to someone.
absolutely. So I wanted to show you something from Shlomo Zalman, but for time's sake, we'll skip over it. I'll just say, to me, this is not obvious. And, of course, it depends. First of all, it depends on what is the alternative, like I said. Well, how soon will you get it if you delay it? And you would think it does depend on the person, obviously someone at a higher risk and, there's more reason to consider pikuach nefesh. And, Afarni tachas kapas raglav, I am, Russia Rice is an exceedingly greater authority than myself. But, I would imagine that there are poskim that, at least in certain circumstances, would think when push comes to shove for certain people, it could be considered pikuach nefesh. And it might depend on the person's subjective feelings in the sense that when we had Rav Shechter here at the end of the summer, his feeling was that on borderline cases, do we consider this risk significant enough to be considered pikuach nefesh? We would follow how the person views it. I mean, some people might discount a certain risk as being trivial and it doesn't bother them. And other people are really, very concerned about it. Someone told me they and their spouse are connected to a certain university and they got an email that the vaccine is available at the university and they literally dropped everything and went that second. That person seems to view it as a pikuach nefesh kind of thing. To drop everything and run and do it. So again, it's not obvious, and I'm sure there are some. I would expect other poskim under certain circumstances to say that no, this should be considered pikuach nefesh. But as a general rule, we shouldn't have to come to this. At least for us in America, generally there are ways to get the vaccine if our appointment is on Shabbos that won't involve us directly ourselves violating Shabbos on a Torah level. Now, Rav Asher Weiss himself says, Ach mikol makom, however, nevertheless, nira delo gara michola she'ein bo sakana. But certainly, going to get a vaccine, we should employ, and we have the right to employ, all leniencies that we would employ for a chola she'ein bo sakana, someone who is ill, where there is no risk to the person's life, but the person is very ill. The person is sick. It's a 25-year-old person, but who has a bad flu, who the doctor says there's no pikuach nefesh consideration here, but the person really is feeling really lousy. And when a person is ill like that, there are leniencies of what a person may do on Shabbos. In particular, Shematirin Amira Lanachri Bishvilo, that we allow Amira Lanachri, that means asking a non-Jewish person to do something for you on Shabbos that is forbidden on Shabbos. So let's say the issue is driving, if you need to drive somewhere, so you should call an Uber, or you should ask a taxi with a non-Jewish driver to drive, even though once you consider this not pikuach nefesh, it's not clear the person then is a chola, but I think it is reasonable. Russia says we should assume you can at least have the leniencies of a chola she'ein bo sakana. Now, what exactly are the leniencies of a chola she'ein bo sakana? So we're going to use this opportunity for us to review some halachos and not just talk about, the hot topic of the day. So you have before you the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says as follows: Chola shenafal machmas choli lemishkav. Someone who is so ill that they need to lie down. Ve'ein bo sakana, but there is no risk to the person's life. Omrim la'akum la'eno Yehudi. You can tell a non-Jewish person lasos lo refuah, to prepare something medicinal or in general to take care of the person. Aval ein machal and alav is a Shabbos b'ser deraisa. So someone who is ill, someone who is has a bad flu. In general, we consider any elderly, frail person to automatically be in this category, or a baby or a small child is already in this category. They require extra care. We can't break Shabbos on a Torah level for this person. I couldn't myself boil water for this person. But you can ask a non-Jewish person anything you want. You can ask a non-Jewish person to start a fire, to boil water, to cook food, obviously to go to a store and get medicine, anything, even if it would otherwise be a Torah violation, you can ask a non-Jewish person to do that for you. So here, you can ask a non-Jewish person, let's say, to drive you to the appointment. What can a Jewish person do to care for a for a ill Jewish person? Okay, someone in your family is ill, not coronavirus. Again, there's no pikuach nefesh, but someone is really not feeling well. What could you do for them? So, for time's sake, the Shulchan Aruch quotes 4 opinions, but I'll read you the opinion that is the accepted one. Yesh Omrim, I'm right here if you see my cursor. Yesh Omrim, the accepted opinion is She'im ein bo sakanas aver. If there's no risk to the permanent functioning of a limb. Again, there's no risk to life. That's the assumption of this entire paragraph. But if there's also no risk to the full functioning of any part of the body, meaning it's not an infection that's going to cause damage to the person's eyesight or to lose some use of a limb. Okay, but it's just a bad flu. You can expect the person to get over it, but the person is suffering. Osin b'shinui. So I skipped a line, but he means you can perform any rabbinically prohibited action with a shinui. If you're worried about the permanent functioning of any part of the body, osin below shinui, you can violate any rabbinic violation of Shabbos, even without a shinui. So let me just review. I'm sorry if I'm going so quickly. Maybe we should have had two lectures, 2 shiurim. What the Shulchan Aruch is saying is as follows: if there's no pikuach nefesh, you can't break Shabbos on a Torah level. I can't make a fire. I can't cook food. I can't if there's some reason for a need to write something. But anything that is prohibited only from the rabbis, so what would that include? Obviously, moving muksa, buying an item, going to the store and buying something is only rabbinically prohibited. Maybe people can think of other typical examples. I'm allowed to violate any rabbinic prohibition as long as I use a shinui. Electricity, that's the greatest example. We assume electricity is just a rabbinic prohibition. So let's say if someone is really not feeling well and it's really hot in the room, they want the air conditioning on. So these might sound like extreme leniencies, and you have to really know the halacha lest you make a mistake, but this is correct, this is true. Someone has a bad flu and they want more air conditioning and they really are not comfortable. So you could press the button with your elbow. Okay, I'm not sure if that sounds surprising to people or not, but any for anyone who is ill, you could violate any rabbinic prohibition with a shinui. Press the button with your elbow.
Hmm.
Did someone say, really? Now there's a debate in the later commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, the later authorities. Okay, you need to use a shinui. You need to do something with a shinui. But what if it's just impossible to do this with a shinui? It requires some kind of fine dexterity with your fingers, and it's just impossible to do it in an abnormal way. So the accepted opinion is that, or I think most would tell you the accepted opinion is, which including myself, that if it's impossible to do a shinui, then you can do without a shinui. You know, I don't know. Let's say you need to like type something in for some reason. I don't know. Or let's say, I don't know. We can think of an example. But if it's impossible to do it in an abnormal way, then you can do it the regular way. Again, a rabbinic prohibition. So if it's possible to do it in an abnormal way, you must. But if it's impossible, then you can still do it. We're going to give examples, and hopefully all of these rules will become more clear soon. You know what? Let's actually go to my question. Let me stop sharing the screen. Let's discuss the question that was posed to me, and we'll apply these rules, and I think that'll make it more clear to people. So let's say this person, the person who the question was asked on behalf, was an elderly person. They were getting the vaccine in Massachusetts a few weeks ago. Now, their appointment happened to be at 4 p.m. on Friday before Shabbos. But let's say it was 4:30 when it was Shabbos had already started. Or let's say it was Shabbos day. So if they would need to get there. So could they have a Jewish person drive them directly? Questionable, and really no, because you can just as easily have a non-Jewish driver. So are they allowed to have a non-Jewish driver? Yes. You're allowed to ask someone non-Jewish to do any malacha for you, including making a fire, driving a car. So they can drive them there. Let's say, what are the other things that make it come up? Getting the shot itself, that's no malacha at all. There's nothing to be concerned about at all. I'm not sure. If, let's say you need to go through some sort of electric door or something, so you should do it in an abnormal way. If you need to press a button, you'll press it with your elbow.
Signing a consent form.
Very good, sign a consent form. So if you're going to sign with pencil and paper, writing is a Torah malacha, then it becomes very questionable. Normally, they don't make you, they don't absolutely make you do it. There's normally some other option, or to verbally affirm, but that would be a question. I didn't, Linda, let me see what that question was in the chat. Yeah, so Linda did bring up, that is a question. What if the person would tell me, which they didn't, I'm not comfortable going in an Uber because I don't know, I don't feel safe with that driver. If someone who I know in the Jewish community will drive me, I'm comfortable with that, but I'm nervous going with a non-Jewish driver who I don't know. So that would become a really hard question. That's pushing the issue. I'm not sure what I would want to talk through this person, and we would really try to find a solution that wouldn't require a Jewish driver to make them comfortable. All the windows open and wearing 2 masks. But the person, that didn't seem to be an issue who I was speaking to. The bigger question, the more difficult questions actually come up. What to do after the vaccine? So this person was at Fenway Park. They got the vaccine. They actually got there before Shabbos, but now it's Shabbos. Now they want to go home. So how do they get home? So now you can't say, well, do they have, what would the leniency to allow them to do malacha at home? And in fact, if let's say it was myself or some healthy person, so you're at Fenway, we would say, okay, so now walk home, right? You can walk home from Fenway Park, a healthy person. Now it happens to be that, this was an elderly person. That wasn't an option. You couldn't tell the person to walk home from Fenway Park. So how do you, so what can we do? So the answer to that is that this was an elderly person. So what do you want to tell this person to do? Sleep at Fenway Park or be out in the cold? So an elderly person that requires extra care is already a chola she'ein bo sakana. And getting them back home in their environment where they're safe, where they're comfortable, is the care that they need. So again, so they would be allowed to ask a non-Jewish person to drive them. But let's say, what about all of those things that they brought with them? So to get the vaccine, maybe they needed to bring paperwork, like William said, or they needed to bring their phone, or they felt they needed to bring some minimum amount of money, or, did I say an ID card, whatever it is. So now they're all done. So this is where the real hard questions come. So now let's say this person is holding their iPhone. Now, they can use their iPhone on Shabbos to call their Uber because they're an elderly person that requires care that needs to get back home. Again, if it could be rescheduled for the next day, obviously you have to try to reschedule it. But we're talking about you couldn't reschedule it. So they can use their iPhone to call an Uber. They should really do it with the shiurim. The poskim say the shiurim of an iPhone is to press it with your knuckle. I'm not sure if that's really a shiurim, but that's what they say. Press it with your knuckle. Okay, so they call the Uber, and they see, it says on their phone, they see the license plate of the Uber. The Uber is coming in 5 minutes. Okay, then they see the Uber coming. Okay, now the Uber is here. So everything's ready. So what about the iPhone? So why are they allowed to bring their iPhone home? What's the heter to bring their iPhone home or any other muksa things they have with them? So they're allowed to bring the muksa, whatever that was necessary to get the vaccine. But why are they allowed to bring it home? So you're right. So if they, so what's the option? They'll leave it there and it will get stolen. Or maybe there's some crazy way you could leave it at the vaccine place. So you'll say, but it's a big bother. But a big bother is not enough reason to break Shabbos, even on a rabbinic level. Even if you'll lose money, is not really in principle enough reason, because you have to buy a new phone, is not really in principle enough reason to break Shabbos, even on a rabbinic level. Now these questions come up often when someone needs to go to the hospital on Shabbos. So what is this? Very good. Or carrying, Fenway is outside of the Erev. Okay, Linda asked, what if they need to call 911? Okay, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. Okay, so what is the solution to this? Or what is the approach to this? So let me share my screen and we'll read another sif from the Shulchan Aruch. Let me just pull up the right sif. It is, one second, let me find it. Yeah. 1 second, I apologize. Okay, 1 minute, everyone. Anyone have any questions or other comments while I'm just finding the right source for this?
Rabbi, what if somebody then needs to take a pain med later that Shabbos for the effect of the vaccine?
Say it louder, Harvey. I didn't hear the last part. They need to take a pain medicine.
Because of the effect of the vaccine later that Shabbos.
And what's the question?
Are there problems with taking medicine on Shabbos?
You're okay. Okay. Harvey's asking the questions. So a person is only supposed to take a medicine on Shabbos if it's affecting their whole body. If it's like an ache or pain, not everyone knows we're actually not supposed to take medicine on Shabbos, but so it would depend on how severe it is. I assume if it's I mean, if like your arm is sore, then presumably that would not be severe enough to just take in, let's say, a Tylenol. But if it's a more severe reaction, then I would think yes.
Also, you're not supposed to. The recommendation is actually that you should not be taking pain medications for vaccine side effects because it can interfere with the effectiveness of the vaccine.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Ari. That's certainly good to know.
Let me ask a related question. Many years ago, 10 years ago, Elaine broke her femur fractured her just before candle lighting.
Yep.
When the ambulance came to take her to the hospital, it's unbelievable pain. I went in the ambulance back to the hospital with her. It was many miles. I wouldn't have been able to visit her on Shabbos. Suppose somebody, we were talking about if one person on their own is worrying about how they should come back and forth to the hospital or to the vaccination shots. Suppose an elderly person needs a caregiver, and the caregiver is Shomer Shabbos. You got a double issue as well.
Yep. Excellent question, Steve. Excellent question. And I mean, the short answer is that once we have a heter to call a car and have the car come, if it's someone who's caring for an elderly person, I would think that person could go in as well, unless the elderly person really doesn't need the person, But in the situation I'm imagining, I would think it's fine. Just as a general comment based on your question. Also, all the poskim all assume that whenever any person needs to go to the hospital, another family member should always go with them, and we consider that pikuach nefesh to allow the other person to come for two reasons. One, for the peace of mind of the patient, like Carol brought up, that's very important, and also we assume a person will always get better care if there's a healthy person in the hospital advocating on your behalf. So let me just read the Shulchan Aruch we have in front of us, and then we'll see what other comments and questions we have. The Rama says as follows: this is nothing to do with coronavirus, anything health related. This is just plain old Hilchos Muksa. Mi sheshachach kiso alav b'Shabbos. Someone forgot, and when Shabbos has come in, they're wearing their money belt. This is like a wallet that is attached to a belt, and it's muksa, obviously. Im hu bebeso, if you are home, yachol leilech imo lecheder ulahatir chaguro v'lipol sham. You don't need to immediately take it off. You can walk to whatever room where you want to place it, and then undo your belt and let it fall. Limatsnio, to put it away in a safe place. In other words, the general rule here is that it is forbidden to pick up and handle muksa on Shabbos, but if you've already have it in your hand from before Shabbos, you don't need to put it down once Shabbos begins. V'im hu b'shuk, but if you're in the marketplace, you're outside in the street, and you're wearing your belt, aser l'haviyah l'beisi, you can't bring it home. Rak matir chagur b'shuk, you just have to place it down there, right there where you are in the street. V'huno fel v'omer le'eno Yehudi, and you have to tell a non-Jewish friend, l'shomer, and ask him, can you please watch this? V'mevio, and then if the non-Jewish person brings it home without you instructing them, ein lachush, then there's no problem, no harm, no foul. What's the difference? The point is as follows: If it's just an issue of moving muksa, if it's in your hand, you don't need to put it down. You can keep it in your hand and place it where you want to place it. If it is an issue though of carrying outside of an Erev, there you can't say, well, once I've already been carrying it, I can carry it more. That's a more severe violation of Shabbos. You're not allowed to carry. So you just have to put it down. So I'm stopping sharing the screen. So in our situation, you went to the vaccine with items that maybe normally we would consider muksa, including a phone. So you just shouldn't put it down. As long as you're still holding your hand, or it's in your pocket, or it's in a bag that you're carrying, you can hold on to it as long as you want. Again, we normally don't advise this, but this is the best solution in this circumstance. Now, so for moving muksa, it's not a problem. Now, carrying, it would be a problem. Carrying it would be a problem. So you'd have to figure out, at least when we're talking about Fenway, I don't know how it worked. In hospitals, normally you're in the hospital and then a car pulls up and there's some kind of awning. And so you're always under an awning, and then you get into the car and there's no problem of carrying, and then they'll drive you within the Brookline Erev. Fenway, it might have been, the person in the end was able to reschedule. So after we started working things out, they were able to find the best solution. But in Fenway, I don't know, you'd have to see if there's an issue of carrying. If there's an issue of carrying, there really is not a solution. And, maybe if, let's say you had a bag of muksa, unless, maybe to call the Uber. I know I didn't have to work that out and find out, where the awnings in Fenway Park, but if there's an issue of carrying, you may have to leave your bag at Fenway, within the building, see if there's a place where you're allowed to leave valuables. But if it would just be an issue of muksa, and it's not an issue of carrying, so then, this would be a good solution.
Robert?
Okay.
Yes,
Rob,
Ari.
excuse me, Ari, I'd like to address what you were saying about taking the pain medication vis-a-vis the coronavirus vaccines, the Moderna and the Pfizer. You're recommended not to pre-medicate with any medications, either Tylenol, Advil, Aleve, anything of that sort. However, if subsequent to your injection, you are uncomfortable, you are having pain, you are running a fever, you may take medication.
Okay.
And I'm working at CVS as a vaccinator, so that's what they've been telling us to tell our patients.
All right. Thank you, Deborah. Yes, Ari. Thank you.
I just studied this in Masechet Shabbat. At the end of Masechet Shabbat, there's a case where if you're on the road and you're outside the city and you're walking home, and then Shabbat starts, the Talmud recommends that that with your purse, you should ideally give it to a non-Jew to carry for you. But if you can't find a non-Jew, it then says the next best thing is to give it to a child, or if you at the end of the day, if you can't find anybody, you put it on the ground and you carry it less than Daled Amud at a time.
Yeah, I have to. Yeah, I know what you're talking about with that, but okay, I have to double check that, Ari.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I have a question around that. I want to
Yes,
go back to the phone and connect it to what you're talking about. And it's out of ignorance I'm asking this. Is there anything that would say, for example, you come from Fenway and it's already Shabbos and you put your phone down because you got stuck with all kinds of things you had to do in between and whatever, and then you pick it up again, or you don't. But is there anything that would say that if there's a potential for any endangerment without it, you pick it up and take it with you?
Sure, if there's a potential, yes, of course. If there's
So
a risk.
essentially, anybody who got the shot, who might get stuck in that situation, there is potential, and we don't even know, because it can come the next day. It can come. You might need it. You might just.
Yeah, no,
need
you're
it.
making a good point. Linda made a similar point. That's why I'm glad we're discussing it. I'd have to discuss if this question would come up to me again directly. So you're right, we'd have to discuss. Do you have any concerns about when you come home? And maybe it might depend on what Siva's talking about. Is there someone else with the person or not?
Right.
So you're right. So these are all the general rules. Every case has to be worked out, individually, partially because of the, the geography might be different. Is there an issue of carrying? We didn't speak about if you have to drive outside of the tchum is a different issue. Yeah, okay, you're right.
So if
Okay,
there are
let me
two-
review because we're over our 30-minute allowance for this issue. So the poskim, all my impression is all feel that we certainly have the right, if it's not easy to reschedule in a short amount of time, can employ the leniencies that we would employ for anyone who is non-life-threatening ill, which most predominantly means allowing a non-Jewish person to do anything for you, i.e. driving a car for you. And also violating oneself, any rabbinic prohibition with a shinoi in an abnormal way. And when that's not possible, any rabbinic prohibition. And when we spoke about that, you have to distinguish though between going to get the shot and the vaccine and coming home. And again, it will depend if it's an elderly person, not an elderly person. So the short answer is there's always going to be a way to do it. I would state that as a general rule. Again, at least here in America, where there are relatively easy ways to get a non-Jewish driver or other such things. But the details have to be worked out, and the details will be different depending on the case. Yes, you're correct, Ellen. Okay, let's move on to issue number 2, and we'll try to wrap this up really within 15 minutes or not much more. All right, issue number 2, which is maybe even more the hot topic of the day, hearing the Megillah by Zoom. Now, this could be an hour shiur, and we could talk about the Gemaras, talk about an echo in a cave and other sources and other aspects of the question. But at the end of the day, there's really just one basic fundamental question, which is not really addressed by the Gemara, which causes problems. Sometimes there's issues that are so fundamental the Gemara never addressed, and therefore, I'm just stating this now as a general comment here, one side of a halachic dispute will say, yes, it wasn't addressed because it's obviously forbidden. And the other side will say, no, it wasn't addressed because it was obviously permitted. So this is maybe a little bit of such a situation. If you would have asked me, can one fulfill the obligation of Megillah and other such similar obligations by listening by Zoom live? So if you would have asked me, I would have said, at least after giving it some thought and reading about it a little bit, I would have said, well, obviously no. Now, why obviously no? Well, the way Zoom works, all of us here, is you're not hearing me. I could be a hologram for all you know. I'm speaking here in the Israel of Brookline. It gets recorded by my computer. It gets sent, I don't know how, by email, whatever it is, to some place where Zoom is. They listen to it, make sure there's no, I don't know, terrorist dialogue going on. Then it gets sent to your computer, and then the speakers in your computer recreate it. And it happens really fast. If you Google, by the way, is there a delay on Zoom? Different people, some people say there is a small delay. Some people say there isn't. And I'm talking about on the best connection. Obviously, when you have a bad connection, you can tell there's some delay, or audio gets compressed or stretched out, etc. But you're just not hearing the person. And it's not fundamentally different than a recording, a non-live recording. You're hearing a machine create a copy of my voice, but it's not my voice. That's what I would have said. And certainly great poskim said that. We'll see if there's any way to overcome that, but does everyone understand sort of that basic perspective? I'm not saying you like it. I'm not saying it makes you feel warm and fuzzy, but you know, do you understand it? Okay, I hope. Okay. Now, there are many poskim who agree with that. Most famously, that was what Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach argued very strongly. He wasn't talking about Zoom. He was talking about the radio, telephone, other such things. But there were some poskim that opened the door to it. Now, as far as I know, there is no really world-renowned posek that held definitively it does work. There are poskim that say it absolutely does not work. And there are other poskim who entertain the possibility that it works. Now, most oftenly quoted is Rav Moshe Feinstein. And Rav Moshe Feinstein does entertain the possibility that it works. Let me share with you the tshuva of Rav Moshe Feinstein, but you will see why I personally find very difficult to rely on this tshuva. Okay. The tshuva is addressed. He's actually talking about the use of a microphone at a distance where you couldn't hear it without the microphone. Or I will add that detail. It's addressed to a Rav Chaim Dovber Ginsburg of, I believe that's Vancouver. Okay, listen to how Rav Moshe begins. Hine b'dvar kriyas Megilla al yedei microphone. Regarding reading the Megillah through a microphone. Kasha lomar bazeh halacha brura. It is difficult to state a clear ruling on this matter. Ki lo nisbarer karoi eich nishma al yedei zeh, because it has not been clarified, made clear to us fully, properly, how this thing actually works, how you hear. Al yedei anashim haroi lismoch aleihem, by people who we can trust, who we can rely on. Now that is the opening line of the tshuva. Now, in other words, what Moshe is saying is, we don't really know how this thing works, so it's hard for me to paskin. She says, it's really not right. But we'll see that there is room to argue that it does work. Again, we'll just pull out some key lines. Hine, behold, lididi to me. Mesafka tuva, it really is unclear. It's a great doubt. Af im nema shaha emes kamiras hamumchim shelo nishma kol adam ela kol acher shenasa mikolo. Even if it is true what the experts say, that you really don't hear the person's voice, but you only hear the voice, a sound is created from his voice. Mitam shekevan shalgobanim. However, nevertheless, since rakashu kore nishma hakol, since a sound is only created when the person speaks, yesh lahachshivzeh kashmias kol mamish. We should consider it like hearing the person's voice. Darei kol zeh shenishma osa kol mamish. What you're hearing is created by the person's voice. Uminayin lanu etzem koach hashmir eichu. And how do we even know how regular hearing works? She'ulai, because maybe hugam came bofen zeh. It's also like this. Shenivra eza davar ba'avir umagia los no. That creates something in the air, and which then reaches a person's ear. V'lachein efshar shagam hakol shenasa b'hamicrophone. Therefore, maybe even the sound created by a microphone, be'esh shemadaber, when the person speaks, hu nechshav kolo mamash, it also should be considered his voice. And then he says, to be totally intellectually honest with you, v'chein hu yoser mastaber, to me that seems more likely. So he does not rule definitively that it works, certainly, but he does seem to lean in that direction. And it's really not clear what they say that it is a different sound or different voice. Therefore, based on this, you should not protest against those who want to do this. Nevertheless, one shouldn't rely on this if there's no need. That's sort of his conclusion. Okay, I will take off the.
There's a difference between an electronic system as an intermediary between the person's actual spoken voice and what is transmitted and then heard by a person receiving the electronic reproduction, because there's a transformation of the physical entity, the sound wave, into a different kind of form of energy, and reconstruction at the other end into sound waves. And that is different. Even if the fidelity were strictly perfect, there's an intermediate transformation. There's an activity that goes on with the electronics that doesn't occur when you hear it directly. Whether
I
it's
totally,
the internet,
Steve,
or the
So-
internet, or the old-fashioned speaker microphone. That's an additional change, which has nothing to do with hearing what is spoken, the spoken word.
I totally agree with you, Steve. I 100% totally agree with you. And, you know, as little as I am compared to Russia Weiss, I'm even less compared to Moshe Feinstein. But, you know, he himself says, like several times in the tshuva, it's not totally clear to him what is going on here. You know, to me, I get the impression that Rav Moshe understood the way the microphone is back in his day. There's nothing wireless back in his day. That you know, like an old-fashioned 2 cups in a string, where you like speak into the cup, and the string like literally, you know, I'm not even sure if this is true. The physics, William Tell me if it's true. The string vibrates almost basically like the sound wave itself, and then comes out in a cup. So that I could hear. There isn't really a transformation, like Steve was saying. The sound just kind of travels through it and then comes out. And it seems like he almost you know, you know, I get the sense that's sort of how he imagined it, but it's just not like that. You know, and his comparison to normal speech, which is through sound waves in the air, obviously is just, you can't compare it. You know, that's what sound is. Obviously, when the Torah said listen to something, it meant hear the sound waves in air. Here, and there's no break. There's a constant sound traveling through there. Here, someone speaks, and even if it's transformed into something else, like you're saying, Steve, and there is time where there is no sound present in the world, in the universe. So, you know, I'm curious to hear other people's reactions. You know, we would like Rav Moshe to be right, maybe. Some ways yes, some ways no. But, you know, to me, it's very hard to rely on. So, you know, different people have issued different rulings of today's poskim. The chief rabbin of Israel just said definitively Zoom does not work. Rav Schechter himself.
So
It's
wait a
not-
second.
Yes,
so
Jeffrey, you're gonna
somebody
say
It's
said-
something?
not traveling. It's not traveling. The sound, you're not hearing, you're clearly not hearing this. And it's not like the sound is coming from the guy's voice through the air up to you at all. I mean, you clearly hear it, certainly, but some excessive, if he was in another room right next to you, that would be one thing, but it's clearly the only thing you're hearing is this reconstruction. I mean, it's not.
You know, Rav Shlomo Zalman says, he says, you know, maybe, I hope it's okay. We're going to go just a few minutes over because you guys are making me want to go a few minutes over, but I hope everyone will stay. But let me just share a screen with you. One more thing from Rav Shlomo Zalman. Right now we're coming off in a very strict position. Don't worry, we'll try to temper this a little bit, but we do have to be true and honest with ourselves as well. This is Rav Shlomo Zalman's tshuva. It'll just take me a moment to get to the. Hopefully, I can find it quickly. He says, "Kitzur hardvarm." The bottom line is, it doesn't work. In his opinion, he thinks there's absolutely no way to see it, and he says, Even though I know, Sharabim Yismu al Kach, there are many who will be confounded by this. But in my eyes, this is clear, this is true. And it is muzar rak le'ela she'inam yodim klal ma'ativim shel machshir ma'ila. It is strange only to those who don't really understand how the technology works. V'choshen machshavos hevel shechute ha'telephone ogali ha'radio malichim mamash is kolam. This is what we're saying, that it's like an old-fashioned 2 cups on a string. And he says all scientists and all Bali halacha who understand the science I've spoken to all agree with me. It then has one exception in the footnote. That's what that number 1 footnote exception goes to. But, you know, it's, I don't know, you know, the only reason why I don't want to say definitively that it doesn't work is since there were great people that entertain the possibility, it's very hard for me to say absolutely no, knowing that Moshe Feinstein entertained that as possible, even though I think it's because he didn't really fully understand the science. Yes, William, what do you want to say?
But again, what Rav Moshe Zatzal was referring to was analog, and in
Correct.
analog, the waves are retained. So we're not even talking about the same kind of technology. If we had the old style telephone system that everybody had POTS lines where it was analog telephones, then potentially this would even work over a telephone. Of course, that's shaky ground, but we're still dealing with the sound waves that are being transmitted.
Correct. I just want to correct it.
Digitized. And so even though Rav Moshe ruled that maybe this could work, he wasn't talking about our technology. Therefore, with all due respect to him, I don't think we can follow his ruling because he was ruling on technology that we're not using.
Correct. Okay. So now thank you, William. Totally agree with you on that point as well. And some people who apply Rav Moshe and quote Rav Moshe also don't realize that there are differences in technologies. So again, the chief rabbin just said it does not work. Rav Hershel Schachter, Mori Rabbi said you should really absolutely, if it's safe and if you're comfortable, try not to rely on Rav Moshe. If it's safe and you're comfortable coming to shul, you should. Understandably, not everyone feels safe or that it is comfortable. If it's possible for someone, to read outside a window. Another possibility is to follow along with a kosher Megilla and read along in your kosher Megilla as you're listening to a reading. I don't want to go through all of the different other possibilities, which will have official shul communications about that. But Rav Schachter felt if there's no other choice, you can rely on Rav Moshe. Now, William, maybe Rav Schachter wasn't aware of the point you just brought up, but really as a last resort. Now, one perspective is that the reading of the Megillah is a rabbinic mitzvah, and therefore you have the right to rely on a minority opinion, if such a minority opinion even exists. And that is true. Sometimes we say it's only a rabbinic mitzvah. If it's a difficult situation, you have the right to rely on a minority opinion. I personally would say the exact opposite. What do I mean? The majority opinion is you need to hear it in person. Let's argue that there's a minority opinion that Zoom works. I would say, listen, this is a rabbinic mitzvah. The majority opinion is that you need to be in person. And since you're the kind of person that can't hear it in person because it's not safe, you're not comfortable, which we totally accept and recognize. So according to the majority opinion, you're exempt. And you're not expected to do something that's not safe or puts you into great, anxiety. So according to the majority opinion, you're exempt. And you don't have to go running after minority opinions. It's only rabbinic.
There's another.
1 second, Carol. 1 second. Just 1 second. So what I would tell people, personally, what I think is true, is that if there's no way that you feel safe and comfortable to hear the Megillah, you're patur. And don't worry about Zoom. From a strictly halachic perspective, you're patur. Now, let me share a few points just because I'm already over.
Basically, what you're saying would indicate that people who have cochlear implants or using hearing aids have the same problem because they're using an artificial means to hear, which they can't otherwise because they are deaf.
You're raising a really, really good question. It's a really, really difficult issue. Shlomo himself, discusses that. We're already 2 minutes over. I'm more than happy to talk to you about it, Jerry, or even have another share about it. But you're raising a very, very important and difficult issue.
Why?
Now,
That was my question also. What
Why
is
are
it going
we
to do?
supposed to
Throw
hear
somebody out?
hear it? If we understand the reason for hearing, we could answer the technology question more clearly. Because the word hear implies hearing, not necessarily the technology of ancient times or the technology of today. So the question for me to be answered is, why do I need to hear the Megillah? And if I
So the answer is that because in principle, the mitzvah is to read the Megillah. In principle, every person is obligated to read the Megillah. But there's a rule that whenever you need to fulfill a mitzvah through, verbally, one can fulfill it by listening to someone else read it in their presence and hearing it directly from them. And that requires hearing it directly from them. So even though you're aware that someone is doing it because there's a live broadcast, but it's not enough to make it as if you yourself are reading it. That's I guess what I would respond to that. Now, let's say if someone can't come, should they still listen by Zoom? So the answer is they still should, because even though they're not fulfilling the mitzvah, presumably, but they're adding to Pirsumei Nisa, they're making it a greater public demonstration and communal thanking of Hashem and praising Hashem. So there are reasons to still do it. Also, one of the reasons is that everyone should be happy. On Purim, everyone should be happy. If everyone would be sad and alone, that's not good. We don't want that. So if listening by Zoom will help you celebrate the day better, be in the more proper spirit, that also, of course, is also positive. The Torah halacha wants that as well. So, this discussion was a little bit too abridged, but the very strong majority is that unfortunately Zoom is not a way to fulfill the mitzvah of Megillah. If someone has really no other choice, I would still encourage them to do that, so that they fulfill these sort of ancillary aspects as a way to celebrate the day, a way to add to the Pirsumei Nisa, the publicizing of the miracle. And if that's all they can do this year because it's not safe or they're not comfortable coming in person, then that's all Hashem wants them to do. That's what Hashem wants them to do. And they're fulfilling the day and the mitzvahs of the day maximally of what they can do. Unfortunately, there have been many sacrifices this year, and one sacrifice will be not everyone can fully fulfill the mitzvahs of Purim this year. That's what seems true to me. I wish there was a way to include everyone. It's not that we want to find impediments, but we also have to be true. And we can find a way to get everyone a vaccine on Shabbos. It might not be possible to find a way for everyone to maximally fulfill the mitzvah of Mikra Megillah. So these are the issues. I'm going to pause here, and anyone who wants to sign off can sign off. Anyone wants to stay on and ask questions, I'm free. I will keep discussing it. But these are some of the issues, some of the challenges unique to this year in Purim. And hopefully all of us will find a way to do all of the mitzvos. And those who can't, then Hashem understands that. And whatever they can do, they should do as best as they can. All right, everyone should have a wonderful evening. Everyone should feel free to sign off. Anyone wants to stay on and continue discussing, we can do that as well.
I got a question going back to the first topic.
Yes.
So you said that somebody could use a cell phone to order an Uber on Shabbos. Now, the cell phone produces light. Isn't that a, well, but so on the surface that's an Issa D'Oraita. On the other hand, maybe I assume you're arguing that it's not his intention. That's not what he wants. He wants to just call the Uber.
Not exactly, but it's a good point. There are two reasons why it's not D'Oraisa. One is we assume only light of an incandescent light bulb where there's light and heat is an Isser D'Oraisa, but an LED light. It's also, everything is only temporary. So meaning a light will go on and then go off. So that also might be a reason why it's not D'Oraisa. It's not, but the LED is or whatever kind of light it is. I don't even know what kind of light it is, but it's not a light that would be considered an Isser D'Oraisa.
probably equivalent to LED.
Yeah,
It varies on the type of phone. It could either be an LED or it could be an LCD. Actually, it's probably an LED no matter what. Yeah, sorry.
Wouldn't someone have to pay for the Uber?
Say it again, Harvey.
Wouldn't someone have to pay for the Uber?
Yeah, but that's also only, I mean, it all happens on your phone, but that's also only Durabanan. Handling, even if it would be, even handling cash is only Durabanan. Maybe you'll find this strange, but right, doing a one-time business transaction is Asr Durabanan. That's what the Mishnah says. And it's a Gzeira because you might come to right. A one-time business transaction is only Asr Durabanan. You can understand why it's against the spirit of the day and why the rabbi said you can't do business transactions on Shabbos. But a one-time business transaction is only Asr Durabanan. Ari, what were you going to ask something?
Well, just related to that, if you were taking a cab and you had to pay with cash, you could pay with cash with a shinoi, right? Because then it's a Durabanan with a shinoi, right?
Yep. Yep.
With respect to Megillah, because I think the purpose of the listening to the Megillah, reading the Megillah is Lisa.
Yeah.
Right. Couldn't that affect the way we understand the way the mitzvah works? Right. And as long as somebody is doing something and thereby causing the mitzvah to be causing the miracle to be publicized, right?
Yep.
And an actual person doing it, then maybe it doesn't matter that you're hearing it directly, but the fact that somebody's doing it and you're hearing it is enough.
Very good. You're absolutely right. So I had the same thought myself, and I'll share with you. One of my chidushim. I actually called Rosh Hashanah today to run 2 chidushim by him, and he agreed to this. I'll try to say this briefly. So ideally, a Megillah should have a minyan. It's not necessary, but ideally, Megillah should have a minyan. So back in the early days of the pandemic, Rav Schachter had a chiddush that he paskined that even though the Shulchan Aruch, even though generally we assume a Megillah requires 10 men to be physically present in one location, and 10 men all connected by Zoom couldn't say Kaddish or Kedusha, read the Torah. However, Schachter said even though the Shulchan Aruch says you need to say Hagomel in front of a minyan, but you could say Hagomel in front of a minyan present only by Zoom. He said, why is that? He said, because the minyan required for Hagomel, let's say for someone who recovered from coronavirus, is not because it's a Davar Shebekdusha. It's not because it is the holiest kind of prayer that requires a community to recite it, or a tzibor to recite it. It's just, it's for a different purpose. It is to make it public. It is to publicize it. And therefore, as long as everyone is hearing it sort of live, that is considered publicizing it. And you could have the minyan spread out and people only hearing it by Zoom. I'm going to show you this tshuva. And then he said, hope it's okay. If people seen, whoever's saying on, I guess, is interested. So I'll show you the tshuva. Not Everett agreed to Rav Schachter about this, but many did. Many other poskim did. And then he has a parenthetical comment. He says, and someone pointed out to me, this distinction is explicit in the commentary, the Prima Gadim, who says as follows: someone who is a nidui, who is excommunicated, the halacha is cannot be counted towards a minyan because that person is excluded from the community, so he cannot be considered someone contributing to the minimum body symbolizing the community for a communal recitation of a holy prayer. He can't be included in the minyan. Nevertheless, le'inyan mikra Megillah, ba'asara ein sarach siraf asara, kol sheyesham persumi nisa. But you could count someone who's excommunicated for the minimum number of 10 for the public reading of the Megillah. Why is that? Because the public reading of the Megillah is not for a Davar Shebekdusha, it's to publicize it. So 10 people heard it. Even though this person halachically cannot be mitzaref to the halachic creation of a minyan, because you don't need a minyan, you just need 10 people to publicize it. So too, Rav Shechter said, Hagomel is like that. So you can have everyone by Zoom. So I called Rav Shechter today and I said, well, I was thinking, so then Megilla also, that to be able to say that it's a Megillah reading with a minyan, you could have people join by Zoom to make the minyan. So he said, yeah, I think that makes sense. So what my suggestion to him was, which he agreed to, was that, so I said, I'm going to share with you my internal thinking. I myself am torn. Personally, I don't see how Zoom works, but I don't want to tell people that. I don't want to tell people, sorry, you're stuck and that's it. I want to find some way to involve them, but I also have to be halachically, true to myself. So what I realized was I wanted to say this, and then I realized I think it's actually true, is that, so let's say you had 9 men here in Shul and a 10th person zooming in. So that person would make the minyan. And we could say the bracha afterwards where the minhag is only to say it with a minyan. Because we're publicizing in front of 10 people. Now, a minyan is the minimum measure of Persumei Nisa. But the more people that join, the more people that are listening by Zoom will be even a greater Persumei Nisa. So the point is there are 2 issues. One is the personal obligation for every person to read the Megillah, or to fulfill that through Shomea Ka'ona by listening directly from a reader. And that, unfortunately, you have to be in person. But there's a different issue of a fulfillment of Persumei Nisa, with the minimum measure being a minyan. But the more we add, the greater Persumei Nisa there is. And even halachically, people who zoom in, halachically, we see that as them participating in the Persumei Nisa, al pi din, legally, because they can make the minyan. So I'm still working on my exact wording of what I'm going to share with the community, the guidance I'm going to give. But, right, Ari, this is the longer thinking. It doesn't work for your personal obligation because that's a Shomea Ka'ona issue that you could do privately at your own home. But for Persumei Nisa, Zoom does fulfill that. So people who really have no other way, they should join by Zoom. And although, unfortunately, they're not fulfilling their personal obligation of reading or hearing a reading directly as if they're reading, and they're exempt and Hashem does not expect it from them, but they should know that they are enhancing the mitzvah of everyone's reading. They're enhancing the reading of the shul because it's making it a greater Persumei Nisa dik reading in shul. And that's not just a nice, warm and fuzzy Dvar Torah. That's al pi din. That's the al pi halacha.
So does that mean that even though they couldn't say the bracha before the Megillah reading, maybe they could say the bracha after the Megillah reading?
I hear that. I have to think about it. I'm too wrapped up in this right now.
Would that mean that, let's say for a mitzvah like Kiddush Hashem, right? Like say somebody was being executed on live television in front of 10 people. Could he say, is there bracha for Kiddush Hashem?
I'm not sure. I don't know. Not in the Gemara. I don't know.
But in any case, would that fulfill the?
I don't know. Yeah. So we have to strike the right balance. It's really difficult. It's really difficult because it's not right to just have open a Zoom, option, because the people who can come really are obligated to come. If you're safe, if it's safe and you're comfortable.
Rabbi?
Yes, sir.
Even on this talk, though, your voice was breaking up at certain times.
That's the other thing, even if in theory, in principle, Zoom your Yotze, but that's assuming everything is clear. That's assumed there's no delay. That's assumed the internet on either side doesn't, get fuzzy temporarily in the 30 minutes of the reading. That's another problem with all of this. So again, I want to reiterate, for those who are not comfortable, they're not required to do something that makes them legitimately uncomfortable, certainly if it's medically advised for them not to. And so that means that they are exempt. They are exempt this year, unless they find some other way to do it. but they still should try to celebrate the day, and listening by Zoom would be certainly a proper way to celebrate the day. I'm suggesting it adds the Persumi Nisa of that reading. So it's not pointless. It's not just a charade. It is meaningful according to halacha, according to the letter and the spirit of the law. But unfortunately, it doesn't fulfill the sort of basic obligation of of just reading it oneself or directly hearing such a reading. I feel like I was a little rushed in all this presentation. I'm not sure if I struck the balance exactly right. And I will try to strike the balance in further shul communications, both that are written and also that I share in other means. I'll just add one more point because someone just did ask in the chat. I'm saying that the requirement for minyan by a reading of a Megillah is different than other minyan requirements. The person asks, well, what about counting women? So the answer is a very good point. And the answer is, it's two opinions in the Shulchan Aruch. One opinion in the Shulchan Aruch says women can count for the 10 of reading the Megillah, because it's a different concept. It's a different construct. There are two opinions in the Shulchan Aruch, but it's not far out. And it's coming from the same place, that the issue is having a public reading. So women are also obligated in the reading of the Megillah. Perhaps the halacha should be different about that as well also. Yes, that is a good point. Any last questions or comments? Okay, you certainly gave me a lot to think about on both issues, and hopefully we clarify the halacha even better. And hopefully everyone will have a good Purim. If anyone has any questions personally about any of these issues, certainly reach out to me and we'll discuss it more directly and in detail.
Rabbi, can I call you after this? I just have a very quick question.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. All right, good night, everyone.
Thank you, Yasher
Thank
Koach.
you. Good night.
Yeah.